Welcome to the Home Education with Ease podcast. I'm your host, Christine Furman, a homeschool mom, entrepreneur, and educator with over 20 years of experience in the areas of elementary and special education. It's my mission to help you create lifelong learners and embrace a holistic approach to education at home. I'll be sharing practical strategies, inspiration, and resources to support your family. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom, a business owner, or balancing work and homeschool, you're in the right place to connect with a community that values education just as much as you do. Join us each week as we ditch the stress, embrace the joy of learning, and set your family up for a lifetime of success. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Home Education with Ease podcast. I'm your host, Christine Furman, the home education expert. Well, last episode, we celebrated Dr. Seuss Day, and I shared some fun ways that you can enjoy reading with your kids. Well, this week, we're going to go a little bit deeper. I'm going to answer two of the most common questions that I get asked and how I help families with them. And those two questions are, what if my child doesn't like to read? Or what if they're struggling to read? Which then in turns, probably they don't like to read. If they're struggling to read, they may not like to read. So those two questions could go hand in hand. So what I'll be sharing today is I'll be sharing my strategies of how I help these children work through some of those struggles and provide some of my strategies. And I'm going to share with you some of my philosophies on teaching our kids how to read. And they're going to differ a little than the norm and that what you may be used to hearing. And I'm also going to share with you how and why I developed an individualized reading program to help build reading confidence in our kids. So let's dive in. Well, first and foremost, a lot of times we see these studies that, studies show that early readers perform better in school. And while that's a great statistic, it also could be discouraging for some families. And I just want to say, don't be discouraged. I want to encourage you and walk alongside you in this journey because I know it can be difficult. I know that it could be hard when our kids aren't reading or we see our kids struggling with reading. And a lot of times we don't know what to do. What do we do? Well, here's something that I'm seeing a lot of. And I'm seeing a lot of forcing our kids to read before they're ready to read. And that is something that could be stressful for you as the parent. It could be stressful for our kids because they feel like they're not measuring up. You as the parent might think, well, this child's reading. Why is my child not reading? Why are they struggling so much? Do they have a reading disability? Do we need to get them alternative help? Like, what is the disconnect, right? So that is a reality. And I know a lot of parents struggle with that. I help a lot of parents when that happens. My kid's not reading. How do I help them read? Well, one of the reasons I believe, is that we're pushing our kids to read so early and we're taking away so much play from them. And as you guys know me, the founder of EduPlay Learning, I'm a huge, huge advocate for play with our children. And I truly believe that our children should be playing well up until 6, 7. And now I'm not saying just all play and no education. I'm saying incorporate that education into play. And that's what my entire curriculum and academy is based around. How can we teach our kids in a way that is fun and engaging and meaningful for them while also being individualized for their own learning needs? So what that looks like is allowing our kids to play, right? Like I know that in kindergarten, they're pushing your kids to be able to read. Your kids should be reading by the time they get to kindergarten. I don't agree with that. I agree with the fact that if our kids are ready, yes, share with them all the knowledge when it comes to reading, when it comes to letters and sounds and words and putting it all together and comprehension and asking them questions, 100%. But if we continue to push and push and push, there may be a disconnect with how the material is presented to them, which we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But it could also be the fact that they're just not ready yet. And if we keep pushing something on them, it's just going to continue to make them not like it that much more. So by forcing our kids to be readers in kindergarten, when I know for myself, I was playing in kindergarten. We still had the kitchen and the carpet with the cars and, dress up area, blocks, all of those things. We were playing, but we were also learning. And I think that is a huge component that is missing from our education system right now. So what I encourage is to incorporate these reading skills, because I know some of you, your kids may be in school and you're like, well, how do I incorporate play if they're at school, right? So what you could do is you could then incorporate the play and the reading activities at home. And I know a lot of times there's not a lot of time after school, before dinner, before bed. I understand that. So with my program, I incorporate the reading skills in a very easy way. And we're going to get to that as well. Now, if you are homeschooling, if your children are at home and they're preschool or younger, this is perfect because what we do is we just read with our kids. We incorporate letters and sounds and asking questions into everything that we do. Read, read, read with your kids. I cannot stress that enough, how important it is to read with your children, whether that is a storybook before bed, whether that is having baskets of books all throughout your house. And if you need a moment, take 10 minutes and say, you know what? It's time for us to sit down and read. And you can read for 10 minutes. Your kiddos can read, just looking at the pictures, or you get together and you snuggle up and you read a story together. And I'm just going to lead into this right now. If your kids want to continue to read the same story over and over and over again, and I know it happens, lean into that. There's a reason for that, and we will get to that. So that is my biggest advice is let's develop the play back into our education. And if you need any assistance on this, any guidance, please, please, please reach out to me personally in the Facebook group, Home Education with Ease. DM me on all social media platforms. You can reach my contact information in the show notes. So many ways that we can get connected and I can walk alongside you and your family and say, I got you. Here are some ways that we can incorporate reading into our day. Take books with you when you are in the car, when you have a doctor's appointment, when you're at the grocery store, at a restaurant. Think about it this way. Replace technology with books. That is so, so key because we want them to be reading and not entertained by screens and technology. So keep that in mind for sure. It is okay that everyone learns differently and they're all going to learn at different levels. And I'm going to get into here later a strategy that I was so against for the longest time, and it may help your reader learn. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. But just again, our kids are not all going to read at the same time, and they're not going to read the same way. Okay? So if your child is struggling to read, let me jump ahead here. I want you to understand that sometimes it's also the way that our children are taught to read, right? Every school, every classroom, every teacher has a different way to teach everything, every subject, right? But reading especially. Of course, they try to do Common Core, but again, a teacher is going to learn a different way. You could have the best first, second grade teacher, and that teacher is going to make sure that your child knows how to read. That was a goal of mine. How can I build my students up so they have the confidence to read, to do math, to interact with their peers? Whatever it took, I built them up every step of the way. But I also know that that is not the same for every teacher. I know that. I know not every teacher is going to pour into your children like they should. So if you are in school and your children are struggling, just keep that in mind. It could be the way that they were taught how to read. I know for me personally, I didn't have a very good foundation for reading. I remember my mom saying that they were switching reading programs, which happens all the time within the school systems. Okay. Switching out reading programs. And again, there's nothing wrong with that because if we're homeschooling, right, you may be switching and, you have that flexibility to swap curriculum that doesn't fit your children's specific needs. But if you're in school and they're switching curriculum, or what I'm seeing a lot right now is the pandemic. Children are struggling to read because those key years of phonics and sight words and the foundation of reading were skewed. They were either virtual, so parents were trying to figure it out. They were wearing masks, which then impedes the ability to learn and see the teacher's lips while she's teaching how to read and sounds. Or they were, virtual and in person and, had screens up, and who knows what the situation was. You know your child's specific situation. I know there was a variety of situations that had happened. And I also know that it doesn't necessarily have to happen during the pandemic, right? It could happen at any point. But I do know that that is a large swing that I'm seeing right now, okay? So why then was it so important to me? If I didn't have a good foundation, and I remember my mom saying that they switched curriculums during that time, I didn't have a great first grade teacher that was really teaching me good phonics and phonemic awareness and, really understanding why and how I was reading. So that then made me want to make sure that my children had the best foundation they could. Building them such a strong foundation and making sure that they were great readers was a huge goal of mine. If you go back to my episodes in January, I talk about my goals all the time. And I wrote down when I first started, why? What did I want for my kids? I wanted to make sure that I provided them with the best education possible. And when I wrote that, I didn't know that that education was going to come from me. I just knew that I wanted them to have the best possible education. And here I am now creating that curriculum, creating that best education that fits their needs specifically. And if I can't do it, I'm going to find someone that can. And that's why it's so important to me to make sure that our children are great readers, to make sure that I'm helping your children develop a reading confidence that is so strong so then that way they can just soar. And I'll tell you why. So if your kids are in school, here's something that is very frustrating, okay? If your kids are in school and they're struggling with subjects like science and social studies, it's because those subjects are written on reading levels that are above your child's grade level. So if your child is a struggling reader, they now have to read, like let's say your child's in 4th grade, their science and social studies book could be written on an 8th grade level. Well, that doesn't make much sense, does it? Not really. So that diminishes their confidence because they're already struggling in the foundation of reading. And then they get to these other subjects that's even more difficult with vocabulary words and concepts that are just so confusing to them. Now their confidence is just shot. So I just want to continue to encourage you and continue to encourage your children. Build them up in any way that you can. And here are some ways that you can do that. One, read, read, read. Let them read any book that is exciting to them, anything that is entertaining to them, anything that they can get their hands on and they're like, I love this so much. Let them read it over and over and over again and find other things that are similar to that. Let them read magazines, which then will bring me to my next point after we wrap this up here. Magazines, comics, menus, road signs, literally anything to build up their reading confidence. So one of the ways that I do this when we are starting out reading is, we teach them some basic sight words, some basic word families, and I focus on those words. So I'm building up their confidence because as they're reading a short story, they are reading the words that they know. Well, great. Now, Mom, look at this. I can read this book. Of course, it may have been with my help, but they are reading in that book, that short story. Rhymes, right? Word families. I lean on word families and we teach word families a lot because if your child can rhyme and if they know that AT says at and that they can add a C in front of it and now it says cat, they are just going to continue to build up those word families. And that confidence, again, I cannot stress the reading confidence enough because it's so, so important. If your child is struggling to read, I guarantee it's probably their reading confidence. They are struggling because they're like, I don't know what sounds these letters make. I don't know why some of these vowels don't make the right sounds. I don't know why, these words don't follow the rules. It's part of our English language as well. It's very frustrating. It can be difficult to teach, but our kids need to understand that. So that's why the repetition is so important because your kid, as they're reading that book over and over, think of younger kiddos that pick up the same picture book over and over and over again, right? Read this to me, read this to me, read this to me. And then eventually they're reading it to you when really we know that they memorized it. But you know what? That's okay. Because they are identifying the words, they're at least seeing the words on the page and reading what's there. So it's so important. Just have books available. Go to the library. Get as many books that you can. And I talked about this in the last episode. Go to rummage sales. Go to book sales. Buy whatever books you can buy, yard sales, things like that. Have books all around. It's very, very important. So let's dive into the phonics and the sight words. Okay, I have so much good content here and it's hard for me to decide what I want to go to next. So let's dive into this first. How I teach reading. Okay, and I teach reading with phonics and sight words. And this could be a debate for some, right? Some people are like, well, you need to teach them phonics and you don't need to teach them sight words. Or we need to teach them all sight words. I've seen this recently, which I don't agree with that at all because you need the phonics. You need the foundation of phonics. So I believe it's a balance of all, which is really, again, another foundation of my entire curriculum. It's a balance, right? Yes, I really advocate for play, but also we need to sit down and write too, because we want our kids to be critical thinkers and writers and reading and doing math, right? So it's a combination of all of that. So the same thing for reading. It's a combination of phonics and sight words. And you've got to have that good foundation of phonics to be able to build up their reading confidence again, right? So the reason that this all kind of came out was I taught my first year of pre-K and kindergarten during the pandemic. And a lot of the parents were like, great, we learned our letters, we have been playing, we have been learning through play, we have been crafting, we've been cooking, all of these things, this great connection with my children. We've been, making memories and making crafts and all of these great things. And they're like, well, now what, Christine? What's next? So I was teaching my own children how to read at this point, and I said, okay, well, it's a reading program. I need to create the reading fundamentals program. And that is then the next program that I created for the families that were in my program, in my academy. And what I do is I focus on letters and sounds, make sure that they're so solid on their letters and their sounds. And that's our Learn Your Letters program. And then we transition into blending and the rules and the sight words and word families, just like I was talking about, because all of that goes together and it helps them with reading and spelling and writing. Because if we're combining all of that, we are seeing that some words follow the rules and we're seeing that some don't. And we have to know the exceptions so then that way we can be great writers and spellers and readers, right? Because sometimes it's like, nope, that word doesn't follow the rule. Why it doesn't follow the rule, sometimes we don't even know, right? And it can be frustrating. Trust me, it can be very frustrating when we're trying to teach our children how to read or reteach them, right? If they're struggling and they're later on, right? Third, fourth, fifth, and they're still struggling with reading, it can be difficult to reteach some of those phonics rules, but they're very important, phonics and sight words. And then that's where we go over. We go over the vowels, we go over the blends, the endings, all of those phonics rules. Then we lead into vocabulary. And when I do teach these reading programs, because it starts with the Learn Your Letters, and then the reading fundamentals programs just continue to develop, right? And I meet the needs of my children, my students, right where they're at. So the program continues to level them up. And whenever I teach it, we wrap in language arts as well. So we could be reading a chapter book and we're talking about vocabulary. We're talking about grammar. They're seeing it with their eyes. We're having conversations about it. They're writing. They're answering questions. They're spelling and they're practicing reading skills, all while, spelling with their phonics and the word families. So it just helps it to all be very cohesive and have a flow. And that I think is really helpful for the families and for our children because it doesn't have to be so separate, right? It doesn't have to be read this story and here's your grammar lesson and here's your spelling words and here it can all go together. And that's something that I love to do with my entire curriculum is really make it all go together. Science and social studies. If we're reading about penguins, how can we read a nonfiction book as well as a fiction book, as well as learn where they live? What's their habitat? What are some of the oceans or rivers or, landforms that are around there? Look at a map, right? Really just bring it all together. Incorporate math. There's tons of ways you can incorporate math in that as well. So that was really why I started my reading program, really to help families teach their kids how to read. So again, whether your kids are in school and they just need a little boost in their reading, or you're teaching your kids and you're like, I don't even know where to start to teach my kids how to read. There's a program for that. I have the Reading Fundamentals program. So feel free to reach out and we can talk more about what is the best fit for your kids. And honestly, this starts young as well. So the activity kits that I have, practicing letters, you can start it as early as 2 and just continue to grow with the curriculum. That's the best part about it all. And then we were talking about earlier, different ways. So we were talking about, magazines and comics, right? Anything that we can get in front of our kids to help them read. Well, I just learned this. Okay. So this is something, just full disclosure here, as a teacher, I despised comic book and graphic novels. There it is. I just said it, right? I was like, let's just give them a book. I want to just teach you how to read. I was against them for sure. And it wasn't until this year that I'm totally on board now. And some of you guys, your kids may be all into Dog Man, maybe even Captain Underpants. And I was against it because I wanted them to read, right? Thinking, again, we all have to change our mindset once in a while. And I had to change my mindset and my philosophy on this, thinking that that was not helping them read. Until someone told me that their child was struggling with dyslexia and that they discovered that the author of Captain Underpants and Dog Man, Dave Pilkey, had dyslexia, struggled with his own reading challenges, and created these graphic novels to help children with dyslexia read and develop a confidence for reading. Who would have known? I didn't know that. When I was teaching, I didn't know that. So now we know that. And why? Why do these graphic novels help our children with dyslexia or even children that are struggling to read, that don't want to read? Why are they helping? Because it's larger font. They don't have to read all of these small little words. There's simple sentences. There's engaging illustrations. And it's making the reading more accessible to them, more visually appealing to them. Because if they are struggling to sit there and focus and read, there's pictures to go along with each of the short sentences. This allows them to focus on the comprehension. This allows them to focus on the actual story of what's going on instead of decoding complex text. So here's the thing. If your child is struggling, I now encourage you to check out some of these graphic novels. Get them in the habit of enjoying reading. And as they continue to build their confidence, I know you guys hear this underlying theme here, right? Building their reading confidence. Now, maybe they don't love reading, right? Maybe they're not going to pick up the next novel and start reading, but at least they are getting the hang of it. At least they know how to read more fluently. And that's something else that we focus on. We focus on fluency and we focus on comprehension and right. So there's just so many things that we focus on, all encompassing in the reading program. And I hope that some of these tips and tricks were helpful for you to be able to walk away and be able to help your struggling reader. But if you do need more assistance, guidance, definitely reach out because I want to ensure that all children are phenomenal readers. So how can we make reading fun and engaging with our kiddos? Well, we can let them choose the books, right? This gives them ownership of what they're reading and makes it more exciting. So if your child is choosing Captain Underpants or Dog Man or graphic novels, I know Babysitter Club for the girls has graphic novels as well. Let them choose those books. And then just remember that you can eventually slowly transition them into chapter books or into other reading, right? It doesn't have to be the end all be all because that's what I thought. That if I let my child or my students at the time read graphic novels, they're not going to want to read anything else. But if you let them read those graphic novels for fun, now we can start reading with them maybe chapter books or nonfiction books, right? And for me, it's reading with them, connecting with them, and just sitting right there alongside them and not saying, go read for 15 minutes, just go ahead and go do it. Well, that's not engaging. If you sit with them for 15 minutes, or if they read to you while you're cooking dinner, or if they read to you while you're in the car, or while you're waiting for an appointment, you sit there and read together. And then that way, if they do struggle on a word, you can break it up for them. You could explain how to say that word, or even just say it. Maybe you don't know, and just say the word for them. And then that way, when they come to a word they don't know, they're not like, I'm just going to skip it. because I have no idea. Or I'm going to say a different word because I don't know what that word is. So I'm just going to guess. I know that happens. I've seen that happen. So sit there and read with them, connect with them, connect the stories to real life situations and everyday experiences. So when we read in my reading programs, we read Magic Treehouse books, but I also read the fact trackers that go along with it. So we're reading a fiction story and imagining with Jack and Annie in the books, but then we're also following it up with facts based on that story. And then we're able to make connections or watch a movie that goes with that. Right now, we're reading Mr. Popper's Penguin. And it's really cool to be able to read some of the books that I read or listened to in elementary school or even, as we continue to get older and read those with my kids because I know when it came to reading a novel, I didn't want to do it. Clearly, I wasn't a very strong reader at the time. And I didn't want to sit there and read chapter after chapter. So Cliff Notes were definitely my friend. And I didn't want that for my kids. I want them to pick a book up and enjoy reading. And I see that now in them. And I love that. So I would love that for your kids as well. So create cozy reading spots in your home, whether that's with some pillows or blankets or cushions. Maybe it's snuggling up during bedtime and everyone coming together and reading a story together or a chapter, going to the library, and being intentional with our time and with our kids. Another tip that I just recently heard from a friend was I listen to audio books all the time. So when I go on my walks, I'm always listening to an audiobook. When I'm driving road trips, listening to a book or a podcast, right? Guess what? You could do the same thing for your kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, why did I not think of this? So if there's a story like Ella started reading the Chronicles of Narnia and she was like, oh, I'm just not into this. I was like, okay, that's fine. Maybe it's, a little too much for her right now. And I'm totally fine with that. So again, not forcing them to read something that is like, ugh, I'm going to have to struggle through this. Here she read Where the Red Fern Grows and Charlotte's Web and all of these other novels that I was like, oh, here, try this one. See if this is something that you would be interested in. She's like, nah. And I was like, okay, we'll read it together. And maybe that would be more engaging. We still might do that, read it actually. But I had a friend recommend listening to it on an audiobook. And I was like, oh my goodness. Why did I not think of that? On a road trip, instead of a movie, listening to a chapter. While we're driving to our activities, listen to a chapter. So think of those times where maybe you're like, well, we don't have time to sit and read, but we can listen to it. So that's still going to build their literacy skills. So keep that in mind. And then, like I said, visit the local libraries. Check out your local bookstores too. We know all about Barnes and Nobles, big bookstores, but look for the little shops, right? Small businesses, they struggle or they can struggle, right? If we're not going. So find some local bookstores, check them out. They probably have some cool things. Maybe they have some events to do and just make reading a fun adventure for everyone. Well, as we wrap up, I just want to share a few things. I know you guys know I said it multiple times. Build up your child's reading confidence in any way that you can. Reading everything and anything, reading with them, listening to stories, reaching out to me so I can help. Any way that you can build up their confidence, definitely do that. Don't compare your children with others or even with what society says. Because your child is learning different. They are uniquely perfect in every way. And they are learning the best way that they can and with the resources that they've been given. So if they need a little more assistance, share it with them. But by continuing and saying, well, you should be reading, maybe it was the way they were taught. Maybe they're struggling with a certain concept. Maybe they're just not finding things that's engaging for them. If your child loves sports, find all the books, all the short stories on sports that you possibly can. Get them excited about reading first. Make it fun and engaging. Like I just said, learning doesn't have to be boring. Make it exciting for them. And then listen to those audiobooks in the car. I think that is so great. And I just love that so, so much. And just always know I am here to help. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me in all the links in the show notes here. There's ways to get in touch with me. You can find me on all social media platforms. And I just want to help you. So if your kiddos are struggling to read or if they dislike reading, let's chat about it. Join the Facebook group, the Home Education with Ease Facebook group, and let's discuss it and let's find out why. Maybe there's a certain reason, maybe there's a certain skill or a concept that your children just are struggling with, and let's uncover that. But if you are interested in reaching out to me privately, you can DM me on all social media platforms, or you can fill out the EduPlay Learning Experience form so we can discuss the best options for your family. And all of these links are in the show notes below. But I just want to leave you with this. I am wishing you the absolute best on your educational journey. You are amazing and you're doing the best. And I am just looking forward to connecting with you. Thank you for tuning in to the Home Education with Ease podcast. I hope today's episode left you feeling empowered and ready to take the next steps on your home education journey. Your support means the world to me. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. For even more resources, be sure to join the free Facebook group, Home Education with Ease, and visit eduplaylearning.com to explore our programs and subscription kits. You can find the links and any other links mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. Remember, you're not alone. This community is here to support you every step of the way.